doubt you've been having a very fruitful conference already. So just to quickly reiterate what we're going to be speaking about this afternoon, our panel purpose is to share the unique perspectives on Australian children's literature, to talk about awards in general, and then specifically about the CBCA awards. And briefly, the structure of our session is our panellists are going to introduce themselves, so we keep on avoiding introducing people in an interesting way. Then we're going to be looking at questions, and they're going to be going from the more general to the specific in the areas I've just outlined, mainly about awards. And if there's time and if you have questions, we will open to questions from the floor at the end. So, first of all, our panellists are going to introduce themselves using a picture book. So, Alison, would you like to go?
Sure, thank you. So, hello everybody, my name is Alison Simpson. There's a promo up there about me, so I don't need to repeat myself, but it's interesting to be badged expert because basically I started reading books when I was a kid and I kept on reading and just, kept on going. So I now work at the University of Sydney in pre-service teacher education. I do write and research in the area, but I also avid follower of CBCA, support IBI, and also Koala, the Kids Own Australian Literature Awards. So I'm across a range of different areas, I suppose, and that's one of the reasons why I've chosen the book that I've chosen today. I wanted to bring my favourite book from when I was a child, but as I told the other guys before, my big sister has it. It was called The Tall Book of Make-Believe, and it started my engagement with reading and imagination, which has stuck with me to today. So the reason I've chosen this book, out of thousands I could have chosen, is because I adore Bob Graham. I adore the way that he uses image and words to create spaces for children to have imaginative engagement with words, with images. He gives them hope, he gives them positivity, but he doesn't run away from the difficulties of life as well. So I guess that's my introduction. Thank you.
Thanks, Alison.
How are we? My name is Dave, I'm a Capricorn. Hello.
Swipe.
That's swipe right?
Yes.
This is being recorded.
Yeah.
So that's it for me. Yeah, I'm an author, illustrator, and my book is Stormboy. And we've got an Aboriginal teacher in the form of Figure-Bone, and I'm a self-confessed bird nerd. And if you look in the first book that I wrote and illustrated once I was a boy, earlier, there is a, and I sort of realised this 20 years later. Yeah, there's a pelican. So there's a few different, there's a few similar things. So yeah, that's it.
Hi everyone, my name is Tren Bing and I'm a publisher at Hardy Grant Children's Books. I've worked in the children's publishing industry for about 20 years. Also the convener of the Children's Publishers Committee, which is a little special interest group in the Australian Publishers Association. I also sit on the board of the APA. I'm also an author, but books I brought two because I find it very hard to choose. And if someone tells me to bring one, I will just always bring two, so don't tell me to bring five. But I brought a couple which I just sort of randomly picked off the shelf this morning. Shinsuku Yoshitake is a Japanese creator who writes just the most brilliant sort of philosophical books for children that are hilarious and interesting and just completely wonderful. This is probably my favourite of his. He has one on death that is also really excellent. This one is Can I Build Another Me? It's basically just all about what makes you you, and I feel like I've all my life been searching for what makes me me in children's books, so this sort of feels apt. The other one that I brought is a favourite from childhood, which is Burglar Bell, and I love this just because it's sort of naughty and ridiculous and the baddies are excellent and not bad at all and just gorgeous and funny, and it's long form. It's so long. I read this to my 11-year-old and 6-year-old the other day, It's so much longer than we would accept these days, but it does not feel long in the reading, and that's because of how excellent it is. That's me.
And wearing stripes.
Yes.
I'm Joy Lawn, and I picked out Matt Otley's Mrs. Millie's painting. My 3 children, when they were young, had this as one of their top 3 favourite picture books, along with a couple of others. And in recent years, my daughter has given me a limited edition print from this book. So that shows how family is an important part of my life. And I love books that celebrate beauty and music and art and hope and creativity and imagination, and this book does that. And it even has that little lateral element, that surreal element where the flowers actually come out of the paintings themselves. So it's a real art book. So yeah, I see it as art, as a picture book. And I think the reason why I've been invited to be on this panel is because I've been a prior CBCA judge, judging fiction. As Queensland representative, I used to judge the whole lot, and judging older reader in 2017. And I've been on CBCA committees in both of those states. Okay, so our questions. We're very interested to hear your response to the questions as an author, illustrator, an academic, and as a publisher. So we're going to start by thinking about Australian children's literature. First of all, in relation to literary merit and marketability. So do you see a tension between literary merit and marketability in Australian children's books, and should one take precedent over the other?
I'll pop in because I feel like publishers spend all day talking about these sorts of things, and I think that the best books are the ones where we have both, where we have literary merit and we have books that we adore and that we know are going to stand up to rereading over and over again and going to become part of the fabric of the family. And we also obviously want them to sell, because it's not, and that's not just a commercial imperative. It is a commercial imperative, but it's not just for us, it's for the creators. It's so that we can all thrive and continue to take risks when we want to take risks on books that maybe don't have as big an audience but deserve to be published. So there is constantly in publishing a tension between those two things. And I think, you know, if you're lucky, you work at a house where you get to sometimes push aside the marketability factor. I think Hardy Grant certainly allows publishers to do that and just focus on this book. I love it deeply, it deserves to be published, it is full of literary merit. And yeah, I think that the two can easily coexist as well, and that's really where the really sweet, juicy stuff is for publishers. Dub, I don't know if you have come across that as a creator.
Yeah, well, I mean, some creators do write to the market.
Yeah.
Looking for trends. I mean, the best way really is to ignore all that. I mean, well, that's where trends come from, I think.
Yeah, and they disappear as fast as they bubble up.
Yeah, it's, I mean, you've just got to concentrate on the book being a really good book, like a really good story, accessible to kids. I mean, they're the ones who are going to read it.
I think there's a challenge there, though. I mean, certainly in initial teacher education, my students are forever saying, well, Alison, what's the book that's going to hook with these children? And there may be a number of books that will hook the children, but if they're too simplistic, they won't go back to it, as she said before. It's a rich text with literary merit, then there'll be a value in revisiting the book that will help the child as well as the teacher go deeply into something. But I think if we think about the market a bit more broadly, it's not just the literary market, books and online publishing, etc., because there's an easy proliferation of cheap and not high quality texts. I think that's where the tension lies, because it's a small group, sadly, I think, that is the top literary merit, whereas the market, when people go looking, they might get drawn aside by bright covers or the latest in a series that's promoted to teach phonics or, you know, whatever it is. So there's a big tension. It's bigger than just the CBCA.
Yeah.
Which leads into are our children's books playing it too safe? So are our children's books doing enough to challenge societal norms and foster critical thinking in our young readers, or are they playing it too safe?
Can I read that one first? Again, going back to my context, I would say the texts of literary merit are not playing it safe. They are deep, they are rich, they are so challenging. Again, my students will say, Alison, why do you always give us the challenging books? Because they are the ones that are really the best ones to look at. And I've forgotten another question.
So we're looking at challenging societal norms and fostering.
Yes, do they do enough? Well, referring back to what I said before, there's a whole branch swathe of books that do not do anything. They're happy to be sold, and that's it. But the good quality books are really taking on the big picture ideas, whether it's a picture book or YA. So that's me.
That's like you run a risk, don't you? Because if you address that, it doesn't mean your book's going to sell. Whereas, like you were just saying before, people are just concerned with the book selling. I mean, yeah, there is. I agree with you. There's so many different books out there that are addressing all matter of things, which wasn't happening 20 odd years ago.
Even less time than that. Like I think there's been a huge change just within the last sort of 7 to 10 years in what is published in Australia and the types of authors that are published and the types of stories that are told and the sort of percentages, I guess, of that. But I think we have a problem with over-publishing in Australia. I think there is, particularly picture books. I think there are too many picture books published, and I feel like it makes it harder to find the excellent things if there's just such a huge amount of stuff going out every month.
The qualities.
Where the quality is middling.
Against quantity.
Yeah, and I think when we think about our retail landscape that we're operating in, which is part of the dynamics of kids finding books, of families finding books, we have a really sort of precarious retail mix where the discount department stores, the Big W's and the Kmarts and the Targets, are where a lot of people buy their children's picture books, but of course the range there is small and concise, and it tends towards a certain sort of book. So CBCAs and other awards are important because they allow that discoverability for parents, for teachers, for children, of books that they're not just seeing on those very curated shelves.
Okay, great. So we're going to move on to literary awards in general now. So the first question is about adult judges, perhaps gatekeepers, not versus, but that gives a little bit of an idea of what's coming child readers. So judges of literary awards can be criticised for over-curation in children's literature, where the books are tailored too much to what adults think the children should read, rather than what they might naturally enjoy. So the question is, how do you respond to the reality that adult judges are not the targeted reader for the entry?
Kids can read books.
I think the reality is that we have, every award can't be a Kids' Choice Award, and there are Kids' Choice Awards that exist, and I think the shadow judging has been like the best thing that the CBCA has done in forever.
Yes.
I think it's just brilliant and genius, and it's just, I love it to bits. And it's different, obviously, to a Kids' Choice Award. It's not kids just choosing from everything that they've read that year. It's them assessing a list that has been curated down for them. So it's doing something different to the Kids' Choice. But all these things exist for me in harmony, and not every award can be a Kids' Choice Award. And I think that there's probably been years, going a long way back into the past, where maybe the CBCA was criticised for the picture book category in particular always being very heavy books. And I think that in more recent years there's probably been a better balance of books that, yes, deal with difficult themes, but in a kid-appropriate and kid sort of while also recognising that good literature can be found in all genres. I think the CBCA have got better at seeing that, and that may be to do with sort of changing demographics. I don't know.
It's interesting though, because if you think about the language in the criteria, you are as judges guided to use that criteria, but then through the shadow judging, that has been that lovely shift where children are being introduced to those criteria, so they're understanding them more. But I will put the plug in on the positive for the Kids' Choice Awards, of course, because I think that gives children an opportunity to voice their opinions, and to do that they have to form some opinions, as opposed to just being presented with this, the CBCA, that this is the list. Certainly when I was a teacher librarian, we used to do shadow judging of our own before the awards came out. We'd try and second guess, and the children would talk about what they would vote for. So I think there's that lovely context at the moment where it's tough being a judge, thank you very much. But that sense that if the judges as adults are trying to kind of put barriers, keep a kind of sense of literary elitism, then I think we're in trouble. But I think, as you've said, it's changed over the years. Don't get me wrong, I think the language has to be excellent, the print quality has to be excellent, the pictures have to be stunning, but they are in the end books for children.
Yeah. But I won't say what award. I was judging one award, and the head judge, I was pushing for Bear and Rat, because that's probably my favourite book, favourite children's book of all time, and I really wanted it to win. And the head judge said, well, I think if you look at all the novels, and she just basically spelled that, and I said, well, why are they in this award in the first place? You're not going to take them seriously.
I guess CBCA doesn't have that problem because you have the specific awards, so you're not judging apples versus oranges, picture books versus novels and so on. So amongst you, who have judged children's books? I guess I assume that judges have to try and identify what children will enjoy, and also have the skills to assume the literary merit within that. So, and I know that some judges actually trial books with children. Is that something that any of you ever do or have done?
Yeah, like I do it with my own daughter, and like you're visiting schools and you listen to what the kids are talking about. Even the other day in my local bookshop, and family came in, this boy was like, I like the pigeon book. It was like down the bottom, but he's announcing to his mum that he really liked that. And I was talking to Rebecca Young from Scholastic the other day, and she was talking about the reading stamina. So, like, even if it's not the most colourful book or the most perfect story, if the children are reading that book, that's important to them. And that's the gateway. They'll gravitate towards more books if they have an experience, a good experience on one book. They'll have a go at another book.
I was when I was thinking about this question as well, I thought the ideal would be that the books have literary merit and child appeal, which is something that we referred to earlier. And I was trying to think of an example of a book that does that, and there are many, many examples. But the one that came to mind first is the winner of the Early Childhood category from these awards last year. Does anyone remember what it is? By Bronnie Stewart. And I just thought it's got that exuberant child appeal, it's got the underlying message of having a go, of celebrating the imperfect while continuing to strive for excellence. And I just thought it was a perfect package of a book. So continuing to scrutinise books for depth and authenticity, Should books that align with popular trends, for example, trends from social justice or from climate change or so on, be scrutinised more rigorously for depth and authenticity by judges?
It's more science than
Yeah, I mean, Curly Saunders' book of last year is about climate change, but we would have entered that. I published that Hardy Grant prior to the illustrations. We entered that in the picture book category.
the flow.
The float, yeah, yeah. I don't know that they should be judged more rigorously. Yeah, I'm interested to know, yeah, what that would mean, I guess.
It's interesting though, because if we think about the criteria of originality, once a trend has been set, you know, the fifth book on climate change may not have its depth, or it's the best one out of five. So there's a risk of going, oh dear, here's another one on the same topic, when actually that one might be the best one of the set. Scrutinised to the same level as everything, I would say, to be fair.
Yes, I guess I also interpreted this question to particularly mean non-fiction, and I guess judges like Alex and other ETH panel judges particularly have to grapple with this, and we might get to some questions about this further on. But yeah, I agree that all books have to be, maybe scrutinised is too strong a term, but assessed to get the highest quality fiction and non-fiction, and often that is done at the publishing level. So a non-fiction award that I've judged, I said, well, how do I deal with the content, say from the science background, because I don't have a strong science background? And the answer was the author and the publisher take that step out. It's not necessarily the judge's step, but we have to assume they've done their due diligence, and then as judges we have to take at face value often that the content is correct and authentic, and if we have any doubt, don't award it. But yeah, we might hear more from you later. Right, we're going to move on to our final and major section, which is actually looking at the CBCA judging. So the first question is about the relevance of the CBCA awards in the digital age. So do you think that these awards are relevant in today's rapidly changing publishing landscape, where digital media competes with traditional books?
Yeah, I mean, sort of for this, like going back to that image, mental image of the heavily curated BW shelf, and how that does allow people to enter an area that might otherwise be overwhelming to them. Like, I do think that there's a place for that sort of curation. I think that again, the CBCA awards and other similar awards do allow people to find things in what is a very, very noisy and sort of all-consuming digital world that we're all existing in, not just kids. I think it's one of the biggest challenges the publishers face is how to get people to find books when there's A, so much published, and B, so much competition from all of the stuff that we all spend our days looking at on our phones. It's just a huge challenge. So for me, awards like this are sort of essential because they allow that discoverability of books that otherwise might get lost in the sea of noise.
The value of the format too. I mean, digital is wonderful, and I like to read ebooks now and then. But you know, there's a reason that I bought the hardback copy, and there's a reason why you went when you saw it. It's that aesthetic response to the piece that you can hold. There's a different reading experience. You know, the science will tell you that the brain deals differently with a book because you know where you're up to in the book, whereas the digital one you swipe and so on. I think digital publishing is very useful. It does give people access to, you know, some wonderful books like this, but the CBCA are judging books, hard print copy. They're not going into that digital for a very good reason, I think. You know, you've been around for nearly 80 years, is it, soon?
80 years.
That they are the book awards, and they are that physical aesthetic experience that is being recognised. You know, through COVID, as children go through school, we're seeing a lot of research where there are problems with keeping children reading, but there are many, many children who will choose to read books because they know it's a different experience to reading on screen. The mind works differently, it operates differently. If that makes sense.
It's a very, the landscape has changed. I mean, we talked about mentioning AI.
Yeah.
That's a whole new conversation, but it is going to affect it already. I mean, it's tough across the board.
And from a publisher's point of view, is it better to be selling hard copy traditional books because they go for a higher recommended retail price? Is that part of keeping the industry afloat?
I think what's the biggest challenge, I keep saying things are the biggest challenge. We're faced with 10 million big challenges. One of them is that the RRPs on children's books haven't really shifted in a significant way, since forever. Basically, picture books are still at the most sort of $24.99. Sometimes they creep up to $26.99 if the publisher thinks I'm really only going to print 2,000 copies of this and I just have to charge that extra $2, or if it's long form or something like that. But really, the cap is still $24.99, and most people think that's too much money. And picture books were $24.99 when I entered the industry 20 years ago. So it's actually quite hard to make money on children's books in general. We're seeing, children's bookshop, like dedicated children's bookshops are closing. The RRPs being low is a challenge for them as well. The Youngest Sun down in Melbourne has just announced that they're closing and re-amalgamating back into the Sun. I think it's hard if you're selling books where, the retail price is $15 and you've already paid the publisher $7.50. It's hard to keep your doors open on those sorts of prices. So print books, I think where children don't have the luxury that adult publishers, luxury is probably too strong a word, but they do sell big volume in and they sell big volume in audio. Children's books aren't really there yet. We sell extremely modest numbers in and extremely modest numbers in audio. It's actually it's getting a little bit easier, but it's been quite hard to get audiobook deals for children's books until quite recently. Those formats are where you actually can make better margin because you're not paying for printing, you're not paying for shipping, you're not paying for storage, you're not paying for distribution. All the things that, when we talk about why a book is the price that it is, if I ran you through a basic P&L, you'd very quickly see how you go from that $25 mark to sometimes not making anything. So yeah, if we had, and you sort of, it's almost the opposite of how you think it would be. You think, okay, children are digital natives, so they should be, but they're not.
No.
They're not. It's the adults who are, reading. I read audio for convenience. It's the only way that I can read stuff for pleasure. So yeah, it's a tricky thing.
Yes, I think that this is going to generate more questions, this topic, but I just have a question to you. Are digital entries eligible for your awards, or is it only traditional print?
They can enter, provide a digital copy in the entry process, but it needs to be followed up with a hard copy. Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
And I think that's actually giving a guide as to where the future is going.
Yeah.
Is going to be both. Yes. Okay, so just thinking about the marginalised groups and communities, what responsibility do the Children's Book Council Awards have in addressing the lack or the perceived lack of representation of marginalised communities in children's literature?
I don't see it's that much of a problem. There's a lot of books from lots of groups, groups of people addressing lots of different issues. It was different years ago. I think just from an Aboriginal perspective, yeah, there's lots of Indigenous content, but it doesn't mean it's all books are really the best. I would talk about quality against quantity, and I think there's the risk because if you're an Indigenous creator, I mean, a few years ago everyone was after us, and whereas years prior we're like, hello, we've got stories here, and now it's still sort of stories are still controlled in that way. Like this, okay, we'll choose this story. So yeah, it's got to be a balance, and yeah, it's sort of. I mean, it's great that people are. Everybody has a story, and it doesn't mean it's like like it might be great for that person, but for a wider group, and it might actually exclude a wider reach if it's framed in such a way. So, it's like I try to factor that into my work, so it's everyone is included, and I think that has to be the process. Yeah.
I think children's publishing in general in Australia has been a very white domain for a very long time, and it is most definitely has changed in a huge way over the last sort of 10, 15 years, and the way that we publish, the sorts of stories that get published, all of that is sort of like this slow moving thing that can be accelerated by market demand. So if a particular type of book becomes sort of hot in the market, then of course you find that everybody jumps on. Because we're really sort of, it's an industry of people who are sort of following the trends and trying to find a way to sort of stay profitable and stay alive as a business so that we can continue to publish Australian stories. But I do think that it's, the makeup of an Australian publishing house looks different. If you're inside one, I'm now not the owner, still the only sort of person from an African background in my house, but there's lots of other different types of people around me in a way that there wasn't so much when I was younger. But I think it's interesting, and I don't mean to make you all uncomfortable, but I think it's very interesting to think about the CBCA's makeup and how that impacts judging, and it may be worth thinking about how do you change that. We were talking, Winona and I were talking outside about other awards have authors as judges, and other types of experts. You obviously have authors in your membership. I think just thinking about how you fix that, because that is a problem.
In terms of the CBCA's responsibility, so that the key to the question there, I think it's crucial that there's an awareness of that, so it's not kind of just brushed under the carpet and kept within Australian traditional kind of values and so on. And that, I think, years and years gone by, that has changed definitely. But at the same time, I don't think the CBCA has the responsibility of the whole publishing industry to try and solve that problem. So yes, there has to be an alertness and a responsibility taken up, but not therefore, okay, we're going to have a diversity board, and we've got to have one of these and two of them, and we haven't covered that one. That's unfortunately that is how some of the conversations go in the world at the moment. Diversity being incredibly important, inclusion, as Dub said, incredibly important, but CBCA is not the only group working in that space. So yes, responsible, but not for everybody.
It's got to be like that balance of you can't just be ticking those boxes. You've got to have quality as the backbone as well.
Yeah, but I think when it comes to judging a story, sort of authenticity and knowing that you can understand the subtleties that might not actually be there for you to perceive when you're coming from a different perspective. I think thinking about the makeup of this group and thinking about is 3 judges per category enough when you want to get sort of I'm sort of thinking about the thing that you half referred to with Bear and Rat, and how, was that a group of three as well?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's hard. Like, I think three is, like, you don't want to have too many judges, but three is hard. Three is like, if you've got one loud voice in a group of three, it's really, that's challenging to sort of come up against and to, yeah, I feel like that's maybe too few. Maybe five.
Yeah.
I've lost track of what the criteria for your judging is in recent years, but I don't know if it's just on literary merit or if it incorporates other things as well. Okay, great, getting a good response. So I'll just throw you a hypothetical as judges, even though like you may have finished your term. If you have two equally excellent books, and you really can't choose between them, do you consider diversity? That's okay. You don't have to answer that. But we just want to think about the influence of the Children's Book Council of Awards. So, do the CBCA Awards influence authors, illustrators, publishers, and others in Australia? What's your perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you get the sticker on your book, that's, you know, and you know, like underfunded schools, they will just pick you know, the long list, the short list, and no other books. But yeah, from a creator's point of view, that's well, I mean, some people just do it for the awards, and they just want the awards. So, I mean, it's, yeah, it's like you're damned if you do, damned if you don't, really. Because you need, it's really important because you know your book's going to be ordered, and there's going to be a reprint, and that means that that's money for creators, and we make a living bread in schools.
Yeah, and in ELR, PLR, I mean, the
Oh, that's-
impact that a CBCA shortlisting has on the creator's sort of long-term income, not just in that sort of big bump in royalties in that first year, but the ongoing effect of having your library stores increase by that much, and how your ELR and PLR payments will roll, and CAL as well, will roll out from that. It's a really transformative thing for a creator to win.
Oh.
Not even win, the shortlisting is really the thing that makes the difference.
I heard a stat from 2021 that it was 96% of all publishing, that's across every genre in Australia, sell under 5,000. So
And we've been talking a lot about how 3,000 is the new 5,000. 800 is the new 3,000. It's about times.
Yes, I do think it impacts the industry greatly. Because as Doug has said, it's a recognition. It's parents look for this, they trust it, libraries trust it. I mean, you might not remember, but a long time ago there was a wonderful book called My Dog, and it created furore in public libraries because it was shortlisted and all the libraries bought it, not really realising it was a picture book about ethnic cleansing. And then there was this outroar about it being a book about ethnic cleansing that was in the format of a picture book. Well, read the book before you show it to the kids, you know what I say. But it does have an incredible impact in a good way because there's visibility. So it's tricky because it controls the industry, understand that. But there's a vibrancy, there's a buzz behind the Children's Book Council Awards. I know there was a bit of flack about parents having to create great costumes one year, but that missed the point completely. You know, it's about having this motor that just does not, you know, the little engine that could, it just doesn't stop, it just keeps going, and there's an opportunity for this great literature to be out there in the world. Does it have too much of an impact in schools and on children's choice? Yes, I did some research with children who said, as you questioned before, these judges are adults, they don't know what I want to read. So that's why I would say we need the balance, but yes, it does have a really big effect, but in a good way, I think, more than that.
Every children's publisher would have examples, multiple examples do think that the judging of what is a shortlisted title, what is notable, is quite unpredictable to publishers these days, and so you get into a situation where, you know, other literary awards like the Prime Minister's or the New South Wales Premiers, things like that, we submit a much tighter list of books because we probably feel like we understand that awards criteria more than we do. The CBCA can be just very unpredictable, so because it's so important and so influential, we can't risk not entering things. There are, I absolutely will not name names, but there have been books that colleagues have said, I'm not going to put that forward because I don't know, it doesn't feel like, you know, the author's best work, or it doesn't feel this, that or the other, and I've said I think you should enter it anyway, and that's gone on to be a shortlisted title. So yeah, I think that's something for the CBCA to think about. The reading load is obviously immense. If there's something that you guys can do to sort of think about the rigour of your criteria and communicating that so that we understand too, I do think that there's sort of there's maybe an underlying problem when publishers feel like they have to enter almost everything. We pretty much just, if something has like fart jokes running through it, we won't enter it. But sort of everything else, we feel like we have to put it forward, and that, to me, I feel like that's a problem.
How many books are you judging?
This published books as well.
That's
The
happening in-
quality,
Yeah.
most of the judges will say the quality was, it's very clear when a book is self-published.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's, you know, I think that that's worth the CBCA thinking about as well. Do you remain open to self-published books? Have you ever had a self-published book on the shortlist? Has that ever happened? No, not in my opinion.
Yes, in the notables, yes.
That one that got
Yes.
reprinted from the older readers
Yes.
a few years ago, and,
Yeah.
and they just
Yeah.
when they reprinted it, they changed the cover
Yeah.
because we had said the cover
Yes.
was too dark.
Yes.
Oh.
It was the story, the migrant story, the German, I think World War
Yes,
II
and
story.
a bit
Yeah.
of-
Can't remember the title. Yes.
Yeah.
So again, even if there has been one notable, it's sort of thinking about the how much you've read to get that one, and is that balance actually a balance that's worthwhile? Would freeing yourself of that give you all more time to be able to read with rigour the things that actually have a higher chance of? Sorry.
I don't think we should just, that's not democracy or whatever, and we only had a very small percentage of ours that were self-published, so I don't think we should exclude that and just say you have to be from a publishing house. I don't think that would be the way to go.
Sure.
It's across the board now.
Yeah.
The PMs and the premiers, a lot of self-publishing. Yeah, some of them are actually really good. I pushed for one to be in the long. It got into the long list.
And some of them should even be receive some professional encouragement and suggestions how they can improve their writing and so on.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of Indigenous books being self-published too, which is amazing.
So this is, oh sorry.
As a kind of argument to the CBCA need to be a bit clearer about what we want. I'm a judge for younger readers and very mindful of not talking about our shortlist, but we, in our discussions, we didn't think it was helpful to look for a book that looks like a CBCA winner. It was very important to us that we looked at the book on its own merits, regardless of what had come before. So that would make it quite hard to
Absolutely.
we
I
want to
think
narrow it
there's
down.
just like there's a tension that can be seen between other literary awards and the CBCA.
of just being open because you never know what you get, and you know, you feel it in your heart when a book comes across the table. You feel it, and other people pick up on that too. So I think every year is different, and I think sad that there's comments like that, like, oh, I don't know if it's a CBCA book. Like, I think that's sad. I would be very sort of, I like the idea of just submit, you don't know, submit it all.
And I feel we're very, very open to that. Julie open to be preconceived ideas. And just on that point about scientific authenticity and so on, we had to exclude some books that we otherwise would have put through, but there wasn't any source or acknowledgement or scientific background, so those books are excluded from our category.
So we're coming from all very different perspectives. We even have Paul as a bookseller, or former bookseller, in the room. So you have an incredibly important and influential role. So all of these roles and everything that these people are doing are very important. But I just think the Children's Book Council Awards are so influential. So what you've just been voting for is going to go out into the world now. It's going to sell more books because they've been CBCA shortlisted more than probably any other children's book awards, and the cultural impact on your books in schools and families is going to be immense. So yeah, we can't take lightly what you've been doing. Our final question is about change or innovation. So from our panel, are there any changes or innovations that you'd like to see in the CBCA awards process that hasn't already been covered?
I've said enough.
When we talked about before, it's volunteer.
Yes.
Judges,
So the people who are in this room have a lot of passion and willingness to devote countless hours. You know, and it goes all year. So it's a big job.
Yeah. I mean, it would be great if you guys could get paid.
Yeah.
And a level of skill.
Yes, a level of skill. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, the ASA just brought out the rates.
Need some sponsorship, I think.
And the coordinators should be paid.
It's a lot of time. It's a lot of time judging books, and it's even the awards I've judged, and it's like 140 books. So that's a lot, especially when you're working on your own stuff. It's, you're missing out in publishing cycle, so you're going to wait the next year. And so you should be paid for your time.
So my only thing that I wondered about would be, and this has been going on for quite a while, because middle fiction, middle grade is such a big area now, and we used to try and judge the top end of that in YA and the young end of that in younger readers, and so it's been mooted. Well, in the past, I don't know about in the present time about having another category, but another category is probably too much to ask. All right, so we've got a little bit of time to open it to the floor for your questions.
I'm not sure if it's a question or a provocation or a comment. I would like to say that what Chen has mentioned, and we've had some comments, it's so important. Thank you for bringing up those points. It's so important that we as a council and as the committee members on various committees and as judges, that we listen to all this feedback and challenge ourselves and say, are we diverse enough, or are we meeting the needs? Why is it that the publishers aren't sure about, they have to enter everything, blah, 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 blah. So it's really great that you brought that up, and I think we really need to make sure that we keep ourselves open to that. Having said that, I have a little point. I wonder whether it's the fact that you don't know what to enter, or that you feel like you have to enter everything. Is that more a statement about the fact that we've got so many categories of our awards, as opposed to maybe some of the other awards? But also, is that a comment on the breadth of the variety of
creating a space for like basically changing younger readers to middle grade and student fiction, because it is very hard for books for fiction for sort of 6, 7, 8-year-olds to compete up against the sort of weighty themes that middle grade can explore. I think that's a really, but there's also so much excellent, brilliant fiction for those young readers, and I do feel like that area misses out. So I definitely don't feel like it's a category problem. I think having lots of categories actually is really helpful. And we do, I mean, I think we have the thing that publishers discuss the most is whether a book belongs in early childhood or picture book, and we will have lots of conversations, and obviously sometimes we enter them in both. They're not where I work, but I've had comments from colleagues at other houses about that they potentially wish that books weren't actually made notable in both. I don't know that I agree with that. I think it's sort of good that things can be notable in both categories, but I think the reason that people question that is because the awards are so influential and the spots are limited, and they feel like it's then a waste of a spot if a book is made notable on 2 different lists. It sort of takes the spot from something else. So that's a complicated thing to think about. But I think that the reason, and I should probably clarify a little bit. So when we were talking earlier about quality, we all publish a lot of books every year. As I said, I think we publish too much. Books also change direction sometimes as we're publishing them, and sometimes the book that is published at the end, within the confines of this room, is not very good and is not what we as publishers, you know, who we're all expert as well in creating books for children. We know these creators very well, and sometimes what comes out at the end is not what we all wanted at the beginning, and it genuinely is just not a very good book, and we wouldn't enter it for other awards. I think there is something interesting about the fact that some of those sorts of books, publishers would still feel that they ought to enter them in the CBCAs. I think there is something to be
And do they
observed
get
there.
through them to the top?
That I've seen, yes.
So for the just in case.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of that conversation. So I'm not talking about, I feel like you're all trying to guess what I'm talking about. I think that that's interesting, and I'm not so much talking about like that the awards should be predictable, because that's exactly what I was saying earlier that I love it's no longer. It used to be quite predictable, and you know, the picture book category would be 5 books that make you want to kill yourself. They're all really hard and difficult subjects, and now there's this beautiful array. But I think it's interesting that there's books that people who work on books every day of their lives would say they don't think actually deserves an award, and yet they feel like they ought to. I think that's just a tension worth thinking about, is what I'm trying to say. I hope I've been clear.
Does that come down to the understanding of the criteria then? So how well are the criteria understood, not by you, you've spent years and years thinking about them, but the general public and publishers. I mean, they are on the website, but I would say not many people actually would know them off by heart for a start, or understand the fine grain nuances in them. Yeah, no,
And I think it's probably just going back to Annie's point, each year is quite unique. So what we enter each year is quite a different with what's coming across to us. So sometimes you're comparing, apples with watermelons.
I mean, it's always a talking point every year. Like you know, the rep is it's controversial. You know, the long
But that's why the gaps between the notables and the shortlist should be bigger.
Yeah.
Because a lot of schools say, I'm not going to order the notables because 4 weeks later the shortlist comes out.
Yeah.
Well,
So
then
I think to
remember
give
that-
credit to the notables and
Yeah.
all your hard work is give the notables
More time.
space,
Yeah.
and then 2 months later
Yeah.
have the shortlist.
Yeah.
And
And I-
remember,
So
they
a lot
used to be
more
announced on the same
notables.
day.
Sorry.
They used to
Yes,
be announced on the
yes.
same
Yeah, but
day.
you know what, if you have a gap,
You need more of
Yeah.
a
you
gap.
get more sales.
Yeah.
And I always remember Sean Tan standing up and saying, the notables are books of note,
Exactly.
and we need
Exactly.
to recognise those books.
We can't wait to see what you've